Hello, everyone. In this session, I am going to discuss chapter number 11 that is on your screen. So I will be discussing only the first part of this chapter, that is exchange rates. There's another course on international finance where you can, basically teach a balance of payments in detail, you know, pretty in detail. So I'll just stick to exchange rates. Let me go through these learning objectives. Calculate the value of the Canadian dollar in terms of other currencies and explain the purchasing power parity theory. We try to understand the differences in GDP per capita between developed and developing countries, understand the meaning of appreciation and depreciation of the Canadian dollar, and finally, identify different types of exchange rate system. So let me first talk about what do we mean by exchange rate and how do we read these exchange rates, that is whether the one currency is appreciating or depreciating. And then in the second part of this chapter, we will discuss how exchange rates are determined in the foreign exchange market. So this is what I have written here, that try to set a stage to understand what determines the value of any given currency and what changes its value as well. So we'll see how exchange rates are changing over the time because of different factors. What is exchange rate? So exchange rate is the rate at which one currency is exchanged for another. So only in this chapter we have to consider other currencies as well, because we want to find out the price of our Canadian dollar in terms of another currencies. These are few examples. This is not the latest data. So one Canadian dollar in the bracket or US dollar equals 42.4 Philippine pesos. One Canadian dollar equals 61. Currently 61.3, but that is very close. 61 Indian rupees and one Canadian dollar. You have to fill here how many Niaras. So if I'm not wrong, it's around um, 585 Niaras for one Canadian dollar. So this is basically the exchange rate. So I am giving you the price of our dollar, $1 in terms of Philippine pesos and Indian rupees and Nigerian Niaras. Okay. Now, if I want to see the exchange rate of these different currencies in terms of Canadian dollar, that is, if I want to see what is one peso equal to how many Canadian dollars or cents, or one Indian rupees equal to how many Canadian dollars, or one Nigerian naira equal to how many Canadian dollars, what we need to do is just to take the reciprocal. How? Let's take this example at the end of this slide. Suppose if one US dollar equals 1.34 Canadian dollar, and if I want to see how many US dollars I can buy for one Canadian dollar, then I just take the reciprocal. That is one Canadian dollar equal 1 over 1.34. The reciprocal of 1.34, 1 over 1.34, that is 0.75 US dollars. So one Canadian dollar equals 75 cents, US cents. So this is how we convert exchange rate. This is a test your understanding slide, and you can just convert this. So assume that a Swedish krona is worth 0.2 Canadian dollar. How much is a Canadian dollar worth in kronas? So 1 Canadian dollar equals 1 over 0.2, that is 5 Swedish krona. So 1 Canadian dollar equals 5 kronas. Assume that 1 Canadian dollar equals 70 Japanese yen. How much is a yen worth in Canadian dollars? Just take the reciprocal. So 1 over 70 is 0.014, basically 1.4 cents. So 1 yen equals 1.4 cents. So this is how we convert exchange rate. Now, so far we talked about exchange rate. The example that I gave you, that 1 Canadian dollar is 42.4 or 61 INR, and 1 Canadian dollar is around 585 Nyaras. These exchange rates are official exchange rates. By official exchange rates, these rates are determined by the demand and supply of the currency. So these rates are determined in the market, openly market, okay? So without any government intervention. This is what we call official exchange rate. But official exchange rate does not indicate the true value or worth of the currency, because it is determined by the demand and supply of foreign currencies only. For example, if I say that 1 Canadian dollar equals 61.3, so let's stick to 61 Indian rupees, it does not mean that the goods and services that you can buy using 61 Indian rupees in India is exactly equal to goods and services that you can buy in Canada for only 1 Canadian dollar. What I'm trying to tell you is that the worth of 1 Canadian dollar in Canada, that is the purchasing power of 1 Canadian dollar in Canada, is much lower in reality the purchasing power of 61 Indian rupees in India. So you have a higher purchasing power with 61 Indian rupees in India compared to 1 Canadian dollar in Canada. So this is the issue. In this sense, I can safely predict or say that Canadian dollar is a bit overvalued, and Indian rupees, this currency is undervalued. So given this problem, we can calculate exchange rate using purchasing power parity theory. So Summers and Heston, these are the two economists of University of Pennsylvania. They actually developed this calculated these exchange rates for different currencies. And this is how they have calculated exchanges, by not just looking at the demand and supply of these two currencies, but by comparing and equating purchasing power of these two countries. So let's take this example. First, let me read this theory. A theory suggesting that exchange rates will change so as to equate the purchasing power of each currency. Let's take the example of Canada and Bangladesh. So suppose cost of a basket of goods and services in Canada is $100. So we have few goods and services, and this is a basket of those goods and services. These are not branded goods. These are locally produced goods. And this is, suppose the cost of this basket is $100. That is, if you have $100, you can buy this basket in Canada. And suppose the same basket you can purchase from Bangladesh by same basket. I don't mean that in the basket you have iPhone, because that is an international brand, and you have to pay the same price. Doesn't matter where are you buying from, with with slightly different, but not a huge difference. So, for example, in this basket, you may have haircut. So, haircut services are pretty cheap in Bangladesh compared to Canada. So if you consider this whole basket in Bangladesh, suppose it costs you 5,000 Bangladeshi takas. So taka is the currency of Bangladesh. Now, according to purchasing power parity exchange rate, the exchange rate should be that the value of $100 must equal to value of 5,000 taka. Why? Because these two currencies, these two values, that is 100 and 5,000, have the same purchasing power um, in these two countries. So if I write like this, that let me fix the font size. Just give me a second. So if I write like this, that $100 is equal to 5,000 takas. So $100 equals, this is the purchasing power of $100 equals purchasing power of 5,000 takas in Bangladesh. Therefore, $1 must be equal to 50, right? Because I'm dividing both sides by 100. If I divide both sides by 100, so I get $1 equals this 50 takas, which I have written here. So according to purchasing power parity exchange rate, one Canadian dollar should be 50 takas. So no currency is overvalued or undervalued. But official exchange rate, if you Google, it would give you one Canadian dollar equal 76.3 takas, which means that Canadian dollar is overvalued and Bangladeshi taka is undervalued. Okay. So we do have data because, for example, whenever you compare GDP, we have already discussed GDP in chapter number 3, gross domestic product. So whenever we compare GDP per capita, let's say for different countries, so we have to, convert all those currencies into US dollars or Canadian dollars. So let's say we are, converting all these currencies into US dollars. How are you going to convert currencies into US dollars? By using official exchange rate. So if you convert currencies, for example, if you convert Bangladesh's GDP per capita in terms of US dollar using official exchange rate, Bangladeshi GDP per capita would be, or Bangladesh's GDP per capita would be slightly lower. Why? Because you are using official exchange rate that tells you that the Bangladeshi currency taka is undervalued, and therefore the value of the GDP per capita in terms of US dollar would be slightly lower. So we do have data that we converted GDP per capita of different countries across the globe using purchasing power parity exchange rate instead of official exchange rate. So why not I show you a data for GDP per capita of few countries based on both official exchange rate and purchasing power parity exchange rate and see the difference. So let me go to that table. So this is the table. If you notice here that, and I'll just take one example. Suppose, let's say two examples, sorry. So let's say Bangladesh. Notice that for Bangladesh, the GDP per capita income, GNI means same GDP, gross national income. GNI per capita, and I am using current US dollar. That is, we have used official exchange rate to convert Bangladeshi's currency into US dollars. So I get 2,622 US dollars per person per year in Bangladesh. But if I use the official exchange rate, which I call it purchasing power parity exchange rate, notice Bangladesh GDP per capita increases from 2,600 to 6,900 US dollars. Why? Because now I'm using this purchasing power parity exchange rate. That is, I'm now giving additional value to Bangladeshi taka. And that is the reason we have higher GDP per capita. Similarly, for Canada, you can see it's slightly higher. For Switzerland, it is lower. Why? Because maybe Switzerland, that is Swiss franc, maybe is overvalued. And when you use the PPP exchange rate, Switzerland's GDP per capita actually decreases from 90,000 to 75,000. For Philippines, 6,000 or 3,640, now 9,450. So you can imagine that peso is undervalued using official exchange rate. And for US, these two numbers should have been the same. Maybe this is because of the rounding out. Because for US, we are not converting their currency into any other currency. There's no question of exchange rates. So this is 70,000. This should be 70,430. Okay. So this is the advantage of using purchasing power parity, because then you are actually comparing true value of two countries' purchasing power, two countries' GDP per capita actually. Okay. This is the example of Bolivia. The purchasing power parity theory tells us that a country with a high inflation rate will see depreciation in its currency exchange rate. So whenever any country has higher inflation rate, so suppose if you have higher prices in your country, what would happen? Your currency will depreciate. Why your currency will depreciate? Because no one will buy your product outside your country. So you won't be able to export because your prices are too high. You have to lower the value of your currency so that other consumers, foreign consumers or customers, they can afford to buy your product if they get more Canadian dollars when they exchange their own currency. So whenever there's high inflation, the country currency actually depreciates. And this is the reason why, because you have to, if you want to sell your product in another country. Also, when your prices are increasing, then in terms of another currency, the value of your currency must be lower. Why? Because of higher prices. Okay. But don't worry, I will give you this example. So even if you don't understand how, when you have higher prices in the domestic economy in your country will impact exchange rate. We have one example that the currency will actually depreciate. So this is the example of Bolivia. This is the extreme case that in the mid 1980s, Bolivia experiences hyperinflation. Between April 1984 and July 1995, MS money supply increased by 17,000%, and inflation was 22, almost 23,000%. And exchange rate depreciated. That is, the currency depreciated by 24,000%. But Bolivia managed to control its inflation to 16% by 1987. So that is also very important to control inflation. And that is why you can see that Bank of Canada kept policy rate at a very high rate, that is 5%, in order to control inflation. And the inflation target is 2%. Right? And the current is around 3% or 3.1%. So this is the diagram that for the Canadian case, and you can see that the purple line is inflation, exchange rate is red line, and you can see they move in the same direction almost. So whenever you have inflation, your currency depreciates. whenever you have lower prices, then your currency appreciate. I will give you an example as well, so don't worry, just wait. Now, sometimes we don't have exact this equality. Let me go back to the Bangladesh example. And here I told you that if the cost of the basket is 5,000 takas in Bangladesh and $100 in Canada, then exchange rate should be $1 equal 50 takas. But in reality, that is very, very difficult. Why? Because there are some other factors that are responsible for this 100% purchasing power parity equality. Parity means actually equality. So 100% purchasing power equality, let me put it this way. So there are a few factors that will actually deviate from this, will make this exchange rate slightly different than $1 equal 50 takas. Why? What is the reason? So these are the four main reasons. So differences in purchasing power may remain. So it's not always $1 equal 50 takas that the purchasing power in these two countries is exactly identical because of these four reasons. Number one, many services such as haircuts are not traded internationally. So it is possible that if you can get $10 for a haircut in Canada, the lowest price, but you can get in Bangladesh, you can get haircut not necessarily 5,000 takas because 10 takas equal 1 taka equal 50, so 10 takas equal $1 equal 50 takas. So 50 for $10, sorry, equals 500 takas. This is not the case. In Bangladesh, you may have a haircut for even 75 takas instead of 500 takas. So still we have some differences. For each specific product, the exchange rate does not tell you the purchasing power parity. Why this is so? Because you can't, export some services. So you can't export. You cannot have, haircut online. So you just have online haircutting from Bangladesh. Yes, it is possible if you go to Bangladesh as a tourist and then have your haircut. That is basically you are buying foreign services. It's possible, but in general, you can't actually export haircut services. So this is the reason why these two currencies are not equal in purchasing power. Then of transportation and insurance cost. So price differences might continue. Yes, you can buy one product in Bangladesh for let's say $3 Canadian dollars if you convert using purchasing power. But if you buy the same product in Bangladesh, you have to pay slightly higher than $3. Why? Not because of the exchange rate, maybe because of the transportation cost, maybe because of the insurance. So these are some costs that are added to the price that you pay in Bangladesh. Third, tariffs and other trade restrictions. So if we are importing rice, let's say from India, the price is not the same. The price that you pay in India is different than what you pay here, not because of the exchange rate, but because of the government restrictions. So if government imposes import duties, then the price would be higher to the Canadians because they are now paying the actual price plus import duties. So prices are not the same. And of the effect on the value of currencies of trade in financial assets such as bonds and shares. So interest rate might fluctuate because of these transactions. Sometimes there is a strong demand by foreigners for Canadian shares and bonds. So sometimes the value of your currency increases in terms of another currency, not because of export and imports only, not because of these goods and services that we are talking about in case of purchasing power parity. But sometimes people demand your currency for just investment purposes. That is, if a US investors might invest in Canadian securities because the interest rates are very higher for these instruments in Canada. So how can American investor invest in Canada? These investors have to purchase Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market, and therefore the price of Canadian dollar will increase. It has nothing to do with those goods and services. So because of this, investment in financial sector will also impact exchange rates. So this is the application of purchasing power parity theory. Uh, you know, if you consider only official exchange rate, then you must have seen that uh, that commodities in some countries like South Asia are relatively cheap for Canadians. Commodities in other countries like Japan are very expensive for the average Canadian because of differences in purchasing power of the two countries. This is the reason why many Canadians or even some countries are tourist attractions. For example, let's say Mexico for North Americans. Why? Because also of the differences in purchasing power of currencies. So your currency is overvalued, their currency is undervalued. So goods and services there look cheaper to North Americans, and therefore they would like to go to these places. For example, Thailand, for example, even India. So these are the countries where there's no political stability. I'm not talking about India. Let's consider to Thailand. So, but people seldom go to expensive countries. By expensive, I mean their currency is overvalued, and you have to pay higher prices in terms of your local currency. Turkey is also a good destination for tourism for Canadians. Why? Because when you convert your currency into Turkish lira, you'll get slightly higher uh, value because of the official exchange rates. Exchange rate. I'm sorry. Okay. So now I'm giving you the formal definition of appreciation and depreciation of Canadian dollar. By currency appreciation, I'm sorry, I mean a rise in the exchange rate of one currency for another. So if exchange rate is increasing, we say that the currency is appreciating. Okay, how? Like this. So I keep just one currency fixed. So I'm not talking about Canadian dollar only. So I fix this Canadian dollar equal to one. This will always be equal to one. And let's say exchange rate is one equal to one foreign currency, whatever, it's US dollar or whatever. And then if I write two, if I write three, if I write four, five. So these are different exchange rate. I call it that if exchange rate uh, rises, that is one, two, three, four, five. What does this mean? It means the same Canadian dollar is now can buy one foreign currency, then 2 units of foreign currency, then 3 units of foreign currency, It means the value of Canadian dollar is increasing. This is what we call currency appreciation. So Canadian dollar is appreciating if exchange rate is rising. And currency depreciation when the exchange rate is falling. Simple. So this is the example. Suppose if one Canadian dollar equals one US dollar, and if increases from one to 2 US dollar, it means Canadian dollar appreciates. Why? Because the value of Canadian dollar increases. Now one Canadian dollar can buy more US dollar. From US dollars point of view, US currency is depreciating. Why? Because one US dollar can buy one Canadian dollar, but now 2 US dollar can buy only one Canadian dollar. That is uh, uh, the decrease in exchange rate. Or you can say this, instead of saying 2 US dollar can buy 1 Canadian dollar, you can say 1 US dollar can buy only 50 cents. So see, earlier 1 US dollar can buy 1 Canadian dollar. Now the same 1 US dollar can buy only 50 cents, half dollar, 0.5 dollar of Canadian, half Canadian dollar. It means the US dollar is depreciating. Now that is also very important. When one currency appreciates in terms of another, the other currency must depreciate, okay, automatically. It is simply true by definition. In the example, you can see that if US dollar, if Canadian dollars, I'm sorry, is appreciating, it means that US dollar must be depreciating. But if Canadian dollar is appreciating, it does not mean that all other currencies are depreciating as well. Only US dollar is depreciating because currently I'm comparing with US dollar only. So if the Canadian dollar is depreciating against US dollar, it does not necessarily mean it is also depreciating against other currencies. Okay. Now, is a stronger or weaker dollar better? That is, should we have a weak Canadian dollar or very strong Canadian dollar? Strong Canadian dollar means, your currency has a very high value in terms of other currencies, or your currency has a lower value in terms of another currency. The answer, of course, depends on different situation. So I just give you one example, and I'll just give you the link where you can read more about this topic. So it depends, on your role in the economy. So if you are going to shop or travel to other countries, so if you're planning to go to vacation to Mexico or to Thailand, then a stronger dollar is good for you, because then you will, when you go, let's say for Thailand, then you will, when you convert your currency, you'll get more local currency, and therefore you can buy or shop more. Your traveling would be much cheaper in terms of dollars. And it is bad for those who are coming to Canada. So if someone wants to come and visit Banff, and if your currency is very strong, then it is very costly for foreigners to come to visit Banff. Why? Because when they give their own local currency, they will get fewer dollars, and therefore it is much expensive for them. So if your dollar is stronger than is foreign students, right? It is difficult for them to pay tuition if they are taking money from their homeland, right? Not earning in Canada. So if they are taking, Nigerian naira from Nigeria, they need more nairas to pay tuition. Why? Because your Canadian dollar is more stronger. So you have to pay more to buy 1 Canadian dollar. Okay, so it all depends. Now, so that's all as far as exchange rates are concerned. That is, what do we mean by appreciation of the Canadian dollar or of any currency, or depreciation of a currency. We talked about official exchange rate and purchasing power parity exchange rate. We also discussed four factors that will, that are responsible for differences in purchasing power parity exchange rate. That is, it is not possible that you can keep the two currencies, the purchasing power two currencies, 100% equal because of those four factors. Now we are going to study or learn why. For example, when I told you that in the very first slide, that the exchange rate between Canadian dollar and Indian rupees is 1 Canadian dollar to 61.3 Indian rupees. Who actually determined this exchange rate. Where does this number come from? 61.3 Indian rupees equal to $1. So this number comes from in the for use in the foreign exchange market. So this is the price. So for example, if I ask you what is the price of one Canadian dollar in terms of Indian rupees, you would say 61.3. That is, you pay 61.3 Indian rupees to purchase one Canadian dollar. And prices are determined in the market. For example, if I ask you what is the price of tomato in Calgary, then you take the demand for the tomatoes, supply for the tomatoes, and see what is the equilibrium price. If I ask you what is the price of a labor in Red Deer, then you might say that this is the demand for labor, this is the supply of labor, and this is the equilibrium wage rate. But sometimes equilibrium wage rate is not the prevailing wage rate or the actual wage rate or actual price of labor because of the government intervention. For example, if we have a minimum wage law of $15, then employers cannot hire workers less than $50, $12 or $13. So that is fixed by the government. If there are no restrictions in the market, government restrictions in the market, then market will determine the price of a commodity. So if you want to calculate the price of labor, we go to the labor market. If you want to calculate the price of computers, we go to the computer market. That is demand for computers, supply of computers. Similarly, if you want to go to determine the price of a currency, then we have to go to the foreign exchange market because we need foreign currency to determine the price of our currency in terms of foreign currency. Okay, so we go to the foreign exchange market, but sometimes exchange rates, that is the price of a currency, is determined freely without any government restriction. That is called flexible exchange rate system. By flexible exchange rate system, I mean that government is not controlling this market. Like the labor market is controlled by the government, or rental market as well, right? So you have rent ceilings. So the price of the Canadian dollar is determined freely in the foreign exchange market, only depending on demand and supply. So if the whole world is demanding our currency, that is Canadian dollars, then our currency will appreciate. The value of our currency will increase. If no one is demanding our currency, then the value of our currency will depreciate. So if you are exporting more to the rest of the world, how can they buy our product? They have to go to the foreign exchange and buy our currency. So the demand for our currency will increase in terms of their currency, and therefore the price of our currency will increase. If you are not exporting anything, then no one is willing to demand for your currency because they are not buying anything. Suppose if you are importing goods and services from, let's say, from Korea, from United States, and from other countries a lot, it means we are demanding their currency because we can't buy Kia automobiles. We can't import these automobiles if we don't pay in their local currency. So we have to go to the foreign exchange market and supply our Canadian dollars and purchase local currency. So we are increasing the supply of our currency. If you have excess supply of your currency in the foreign exchange market, the price of your currency will decrease. So your currency will depreciate. Okay, so this is all about demand and supply if there's no government restrictions. Sometimes government restrict, like in the labor market. Okay, you cannot buy and sell less than $15, these workers. That is possible. So similarly, this is what we call fixed exchange rate system. So by fixed exchange rate system, so these are the three exchange rate systems. Sorry, I have to go to back to this relevant slide here. Let me go there first. So fixed exchange rate system, when government fixes the exchange rate, government says, okay, we don't care, but one Canadian dollar equal 50 Indian rupees all the time. And we will see how government actually manages to keep exchange rate at fixed rate. Okay. And then this third one, that is the combination of these two, managed exchange rate. If you see in the inflation, Bank of Canada controls inflation, but Bank of Canada doesn't say that inflation rate should be at one specific point. It says we want the inflation rate to be between 1% and 3%. So that is the band, inflation band. It's a whole range. Similarly, by managed exchange rate, Bank of Canada actually controls the exchange rate within a band. That if exchange rate is depreciating too quickly, then Bank of Canada intervenes. If a Canadian dollar is appreciating too quickly, then Bank of Canada intervene. I'm not saying that currently Bank of Canada is doing this. I think, if I'm not wrong, it is okay. Let me go and show you here. So this is how federal bank or central bank or Bank of Canada, in our case, control exchange rates. So exchange rates pegged by the government and therefore prevented from rising or falling. How this is going to happen, how banks actually control or fix these exchange rates. The bank intervene via an exchange fund account. It holds international reserves for the federal government. So all central banks, including Bank of Canada, hold foreign currencies, US dollars, euros, British pounds, Swiss francs, all these currencies. If it depreciates too quickly, so if our currency depreciates too quickly, the bank would use other currencies to buy Canadian dollars. So if our currency is depreciating, what is the meaning? Depreciating means that no one is demanding our currency and there's more supply in the foreign exchange market. So Bank of Canada actually buys Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market. How? By using its own exchange fund account. That is, Bank of Canada will actually give more foreign currencies in the international foreign exchange market and buy Canadian dollars. If the price of our dollar rises too quickly, that is, if our currency is appreciating too quickly, the Bank, that is of Canada, would sell Canadian dollars and buy other currencies from the foreign exchange market. So this is how bank actually controls exchange rate. You have to go to this Bank of Canada website, and I cannot actually show you this website here because I can't. When I click this, it will open in another window. Okay, but make sure you just go to this link. This link will take you to the Bank of Canada website, understanding exchange rates. So there are several topics: letting the currency float, all these topics, either stronger or weaker dollar, better, floating dollar as a stock absorber. So you have to please read this as well. Okay, I'm just looking one thing. Yeah, so this is on this website. It says the last time the bank, that is Bank of Canada, intervened to influence the Canadian dollar was in September 1998. Since 1998, Bank of Canada actually has not intervened in foreign exchange market. So our exchange rate is totally floating. Floating means it's totally not floating. I should not have used this word. It's totally determined by the market forces. That is totally flexible exchange rate system. Okay, not managed or controlled. So these are all the definitions. Again, I don't have to review them again. Fixed exchange rate, flexible exchange rate, then managed exchange rate. Managed exchange rate means a mix of fixed and flexible strategies. This is also called as dirty float. So remember, I used the word floating. If the exchange rate is floating freely, floating means changing. That if exchange rate changes freely without any government restriction, that is called flexible exchange rate system. But if government the central banks are actually controlling this exchange rate within a band. So yes, the exchange rate is also changing, but within that band, we don't call it float because it's not freely floating. It is within the range. That is what we call dirty float. So it's totally free. That is float. If it is managed, and of course it is still floating, but within a range, that is called dirty float. And then we have, oh, sorry. So we have fixed exchange rate, we have flexible exchange rate, and we have managed exchange rate. Now, in order to discuss flexible exchange rate, it's so easy. Flexible exchange rate is like you are just calculating the price of a computer, price of tomatoes, or price of workers. Like same like price of Canadian dollars. So this is the diagram. Demand for Canadian dollars, supply of Canadian dollars. But now notice there are so many ways people demand Canadian dollars. In US investors, they're also demanding Canadian dollars because they want to invest in different financial securities. US investors also want to demand Canadian dollar because they want to invest not in financial assets but in physical assets, right? They want to set up a business in Canada. They're also demanding Canadian dollars. US consumers are buying Canadian produced goods from Canada. They also are demanding Canadian dollars. So there are different people are demanding Canadian dollars. I can't include in one diagram. That would be very difficult. So we only stick to exports only. So whenever Canada exports its goods and services outside Canada, of course, to the rest of the world will demand our currency. And that is the demand for Canadian dollar curve. So this is the demand for Canadian dollars. Who are demanding? Foreigners who want to buy our products. Similarly, imports. When you are importing, technically you are supplying your dollars, your currency in order to demand foreign currency. So this is the supply of Canadian dollars. That is nothing but imports. I know that we supply Canadian dollar for other purposes as well. For example, if Canadian investors want to invest in US, they also need US dollar. So they supply Canadian dollar and demand US dollar as well. But we are sticking only to imports. Now, and you know, this is once you know the exports and imports of Canadian dollars, that is demand and supply, same analysis. The equilibrium will give you the official exchange rate. That is exchange rate. So if you are trying to export more, your currency, the value of your currency will increase. If you export less, your currency, the value of your currency will decrease. Similarly, if you import more, the value of your currency will decrease. If you import less, the value of your currency will increase. We will discuss this in a moment. Right? You have to please, you have to read this your own. Okay. Now, so what I have done in the actual slides, you have different slides for this topic. I've already discussed why people demand our currency. There are several reasons. And in the diagram, I only stick to exports. This is what I just told you. So there are several reasons. Number one, all these reasons are given here. Number one, why foreigners, why they demand our currency? Because they want to buy our products, exports. Direct and portfolio investors who want to invest in our country, either in financial assets, buying bonds, security, stocks, mutual funds, and other securities, or invest in physical infrastructure, any physical investment. That is both. They demand our currency. Earnings on foreign investment by Canadians. So earnings on foreign investment by Canadian. So for example, if a Canadian investor invests in US, then his earning will be in US dollars. Okay, will be in US dollars. And he wants to bring that money back home. He don't want to spend here. He lives here or she lives here. So then he or she, this investor, will demand Canadian dollar. Want to buy Canadian dollar, giving US dollar. That is also a demand for Canadian dollars. Arbitragers. Uh, there's another one, that is currency speculators. They also demand foreign currency, including Canadian dollars. So they just buy when the dollar is low and sell when the dollar is high. This is what we call speculation. So this is currency speculations. Arbitragers. This is another reason why foreigners buy our currency. So these foreigners, they buy when they see a difference in quoted exchange rates on different international exchanges. Unlike speculators, those engaged in arbitrage are not concerned with the future value of the Canadian dollars and are not holding them to sell at some later date. They are selling immediately. Let me spend 1 minute and differentiate between what do we mean by arbitragers and speculators. Arbitragers are actually, they are making money right away. So they see into different foreign exchange markets, and if they see a price difference, they just buy low and sell high right away. That is arbitrages. So they are selling immediately. A speculator means they are holding the currency. For example, suppose if I know I am in a foreign country and if I know that Canadian dollar is going to appreciate further after 1 year, I will buy Canadian dollar in that country. In foreign country, I'll buy and just keep that 1,000 Canadian dollar with me. After 1 year, if Canadian dollar appreciates a lot, I will sell and make money. Okay, so they both are doing the same thing, but one is holding dollar and they speculate that will increase, and the other one is quickly selling and buying into different markets, foreign exchange markets. So this is the demand for Canadian dollars that I had shown you earlier. Notice that this is the price for Canadian dollar in pengos. I believe it's Hungarian currency. You can read the text, or you could have written US dollar, any currency, right? So notice when price of Canadian dollar is increasing, I told you it means that currency is appreciating, because now $1 can buy more and more and more of foreign currency. If you move in the upward direction on the vertical axis, it means your currency is appreciating. So when your currency appreciates, you will export less. People will demand less products from Canada. Why? Because increasing your or appreciation of Canadian dollars will actually tell foreigners that the price of their product, that is Canadian produced, locally produced product, will be higher in terms of foreign currency. And that is why they are not going to buy your product. I'll give you an example, but you have to remember that the demand for Canadian dollar is a downward sloping line. Okay, let's take this. So this is the example. When the Canadian dollar depreciates meaning what? Depreciate means you are moving down the vertical axis, right? The value of your Canadian dollar is decreasing in terms of other currency like this. So it's like this. Sorry. So if price of your currency decreases, then country will export more. Why export more? I will show you here. So when the country will export more, why export more? I will show you here. So when the Canadian dollar depreciates, that is the value of Canadian dollar decreases, that is price of Canadian dollar decreases. So the effective price in terms of another currency of Canadian exports decrease. So when you currency, okay, I'm not talking about price in Canadian dollars. If Canadian dollar depreciates, and if you go to the Walmart, you will still see the same price of all those goods and services. They are not changing. But yes, the prices of those goods and services in foreign currency will be different because of the decrease in Canadian dollar. Decrease in Canadian dollar means depreciation of Canadian dollar. So if prices are decreasing, then foreign consumers will be attracted to buy, and therefore your total exports will increase. Increase in export means increase in the demand for Canadian dollars. This is what I'm trying to show you, that if currency depreciates, then demand for Canadian dollars will increase. Quantity demand. There's no shift in the demand curve. You are moving down the demand curve. How this is happening, let's take a simple example, and I'm not going to give you the same example for appreciation. You can do your own. Suppose the price of product X, any X, let's say whatever be this X, and this is the exported product. So suppose if the price is Canadian dollar 10. Exchange rate right now is 1 Canadian dollar equals 1 US dollar. So if US citizens, if they want to buy our product, this X, they have to pay the price of 10 US dollar. So the price of the same product X in US currency would be $10. Now I'll change the exchange rate and see what is happening. If I change the exchange rate, that is, suppose Canadian dollar depreciates, the now one Canadian dollar is equal to only 50 cents US cents, or 0.5 US dollars only. So the value of Canadian dollar decreases. Now see what is happening. These US citizens, now they have to pay only $5 for this product. Why they are now paying $5? Because $5 equal to 10 Canadian dollars. So for US customers, the effective price of your product has gone down by 50% because of this exchange rate. And therefore, they are going to demand more, simply because prices are lower. So you are more competitive in the international market. And therefore, you can export more. So the demand for your currency will increase. Same opposite case for the appreciation. Let me go back to this diagram and see what is happening. So when currency depreciates, the price of your product in foreign currency will increase actually, and therefore you export more. That is, the demand for Canadian dollar will increase. That is why I am saying the demand for Canadian dollar is increasing. If currency appreciates, your price is higher in terms of foreign currency, and therefore you won't be able to export more, and therefore no one will, not no one, but the demand for your currency will decrease. The demand for decrease means, I kept saying demand is actually quantity demanded. Why? Because I'm moving on this same curve, either in this direction or in this direction. There's no shift in the demand curve. Okay, so this is exports demand curve, or demand for Canadian dollar. And remember the price of Canadian dollar in another currency. Remember this. Supply of Canadian dollars. If you import more, it means you are supplying more Canadian dollar in the foreign exchange market. To purchase goods from abroad, Canadians buy foreign currency with Canadian dollars. So increasing the supply of Canadian dollars in the international money market. So you are basically supplying more. Now, one reason why you supply more Canadian dollars, or you actually demand foreign currency, is because you are importing. That is, whenever you buy goods and services outside Canada, you have to buy their currency by supplying your currency. That is one reason, and we stick to this reason only. But there are other reasons as well, which you have to read your own. Few exactly opposite of the demand for Canadian dollars. Foreign investments. So if you invest in the foreign country, foreigners who receive income, gifts, and transfer from Canada, currency speculators as well, and arbitrageurs. Right? So there are these two people are impacting exchange rates, right? Or supply and demand for foreign currency. But we stick to this only imports. Okay. So import or demand or supply of Canadian dollar is an upward sloping curve. The supply curve of the Canadian dollar is a conventional supply curve. Okay, that is upward sloping supply curve. I don't have to show you, but you can easily find that if your currency is appreciating, right, you are going to import more. Why? Because when your currency appreciates, the price of goods and services in the foreign country will be cheaper in terms of your currency. So it is better to purchase from other countries. Okay. Similarly, if your currency is depreciating, your import will become more expensive, and therefore you are going to reduce import. You reduce the supply of Canadian dollars. Once you know demand and supply, then it's easy to examine. Okay, so you have to, I've already given you here in both cases, that is when currency appreciates, when currency depreciates, what would happen to export, what would happen to imports. You just remember one thing. Exports mean demand for Canadian dollar. Imports mean supply of Canadian dollar. This is what you have to remember. So now this is the same diagram, equilibrium in foreign exchange market, and now I'm talking about flexible exchange rate system. There is no government intervention. So exchange rate is determined by the intersection of import and exports, like this. So right now exchange rate is this. Now see what would happen if there is an increase in demand for Canadian dollars. So suppose if Canada started exporting more goods and services to the rest of the world, what would happen? Look at this. So when Canada started exporting more, the demand for Canadian dollar, that is exports, will increase. So you can see the demand curve will shift to the right. If there's no government intervention, then exchange rate will be equilibrium, new equilibrium exchange rate will be here, which is higher than the previous one. It means that the Canadian dollar appreciates. So now students normally ask foreign students that why our currency is so weak, why other countries' currencies are very stronger, why we pay 61 Indian rupees or 584 naira to buy just one Canadian dollar. This is one of the reasons that those countries are not exporting to the rest of the world. And that is why no one is demanding their currency. And that is the reason the value of their currency is low. If you export more, yes, your currency will be more stronger. Okay, but it does not mean that a stronger currency is always good. But I'm just talking about appreciation and depreciation. I'm not talking about whether this is good or bad. Now, you must be wondering why Canada suddenly started exporting more. So there are several reasons, and these reasons are given here. That is why foreigners are demanding our currency. That is basically, there's no change in exchange rate. There's no change in exchange rates. But now your currency is demanded more. These are some of the reasons. Number one, the level of foreign incomes. So suppose if per capita income in United States increases, then US consumers will buy more products from Canada, and therefore you export more. That is why we normally say that you have to have a prosperous neighbors. Because if your neighbors are prosperous, then you'll be able to sell more. If your neighbor is not doing well, then what are you going to do? So they are not going to buy from you because they are struggling to even survive. The price of Canadian products relative to the price of foreign products. This is what I said initially, that if you have very high inflation in your country, you won't be able to sell your product. No one is willing to buy your product. So you can't increase your export. Your export will decrease actually. Foreign tastes as well. And comparative interest rates as well. So if interest rate is very high in Canada, and when I say interest rate, I mean real interest rate, excluding inflationary impact, then maybe other investors from other countries might invest in your country because of high interest rate. So they demand more Canadian dollars. Right? But we are only sticking to, remember, to exports. So that is, you mean foreigners are demanding Canadian dollars because they want to buy goods and services, not they demand Canadian dollars to invest in stocks. But I just gave you all these reasons why people, that is foreigners, demand our currency. So you see, when demand shifts to the right, currency appreciates. I have not shown here, but if the demand for your currency, that if you are exporting less for whatever reasons, then you can see your currency will depreciate. Similar with imports. So if you are importing more, you are not producing anything, just importing everything, what would happen? Your currency will depreciate because you are supplying your currency in the foreign exchange market a lot, and therefore the value of your currency will decrease in terms of another currency. Similarly, if you decrease your imports like this, if you restrict import, that is why sometimes government restricts imports, also to to protect the domestic producers, domestic funds, but sometimes also to impact this exchange rate. So your currency will appreciate if the supply of Canadian dollar decreases in the international market. And this is how central banks actually control exchange rate in fixed exchange rate system, that they manipulate the supply and demand or the supply and demand of the local currency in the foreign exchange market. Okay, we'll discuss in a moment. So what we are talking about, that once the exchange rate is determined by the intersection of demand and supply curve for foreign currency, for Canadian dollar, not foreign currency, for Canadian dollars, then we also see that how this exchange rate is changing over time because of changes in the demand and supply curves. And there's no government restriction. Question number 1. Assume Canada has a flexible exchange rate system regime, that is no intervention. Explain the impact on the Canadian foreign exchange market if there is an increase in inflation rate. So suppose if you have a high inflation rate in our country, what would happen? And when I say foreign exchange market, I mean that diagram, the demand for Canadian dollar, the supply Canadian dollar. So let's go to the demand and supply for the Canadian dollar and see what is happening. An increase in inflation will reduce the attractiveness of the Canadian exports. No one will buy from you because your price has gone up. So the price will also go up in their own currency if there's no change in exchange rate. There will be a decrease in the demand for Canadian dollars. What would happen? So this is actually what is happening here. This is the foreign exchange market, right? Here you have basically currency, your local currency. Here you have price of local currency in terms of another currency, okay? This is the demand, this is the supply. Because of the inflation, exports decreases like this. See what is happening. Your currency depreciates actually. So your currency depreciates when you have inflation, okay? This is what I shown you in this diagram, and this is what I told you that we'll discuss this. Let me show you, just give me a sec. this. So whenever you have inflation, your currency depreciates. Now this is happening. Okay, so this is I showed you here using foreign exchange market. So this is exactly what I'm saying, that when there is inflation, there's decrease in exports, and of course demand for Canadian dollar will be lower, and therefore the value of your currency will decrease. Okay. And a flexible exchange rate system. Why flexible exchange rate system? Because the government is not controlling this exchange rate. Now we have fixed exchange rates system or regime. Exchange rate pegged by government and therefore prevented from rising or falling. So government will not allow exchange rate to change. Now see what would happen if demand for Canadian dollar increases or demand for Canadian dollar decreases in both cases. Let's see this first case. So okay, let's talk about arguments for fixed exchange rates. Add certainty to international trade, prevent instability in import and export industries, because you know that exchange rate will be the same. Discourage currency speculation, I told you, and appeal to people who equate exchange rate with national prestige, but that is not always the case. So these are some of the reasons why some economies prefer this fixed exchange rate system, but I don't think that any country is now following this system. So this is the diagram for fixed exchange rates, and if demand increases, what would happen? Okay. So look at this and let's analyze this. So exchange rate is fixed at this rate. This is fixed. That is why I have drawn this straight line. It's fixed. It cannot be changed. Now exchange rate is this. Suppose demand increases. That is, maybe you are now exporting more. So if you are exporting more, the exchange rate, according to this new demand curve, should have been somewhere here, right? So this should be the exchange rate, but Bank of Canada will not allow this exchange rate to go up to ER2. How? So first read this. Increase in demand does not lead to currency appreciation. So Bank of Canada will not allow to appreciate Canadian dollars. A result is a shortage of Canadian dollars. And I'll discuss. Canadian dollar is undervalued. So right now, the open market suggests that exchange rate should be ER2. But Bank of Canada is keeping exchange rate as this. It means your exchange rate, current exchange rate, is undervalued. Okay, it should have been higher, and you just kept this at F, fixed exchange rate. Now, how central banks or Bank of Canada actually control this? How these banks, central banks basically control this fixed exchange rate. So this is the procedure. Now let me erase this and then I tell you. So notice that when the demand shifts to the right, now you have, this is the new demand, this point. This blue point is the new demand for Canadian dollars in the foreign, this point. This blue point is the new demand for Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market. Okay. Now I change the color to green and then mark this point. This, remember, this is not equilibrium. This green point is no more an equilibrium point because demand curve shifted to the right. This green point is on the supply curve only because this is a supply at this exchange rate of Canadian dollars. So supply is green, demand is blue. So you can see this is the excess demand of Canadian dollars. So basically now in the foreign exchange market, people are demanding more Canadian dollar, but there's no Canadian dollar in the market. That is why if government allow this market to operate freely, then exchange rate will increase and the Canadian dollar will appreciate because demand is more. But Bank of Canada doesn't want it to happen. So what Bank of Canada will do, I told you the Bank of Canada has, international reserves, right? Currency reserves. What we call that. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry, but okay, I'll have to. Just give me a sec. You have to go to this website, right? And so see how Bank of Canada actually controls. But now Bank of Canada doesn't do this, okay? So this is exchange fund account where bank has foreign reserves of different currencies. So Bank of Canada will use its exchange fund. So foreign exchange fund. Okay, oh, it's not working. Just give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second. I don't know why it's not working. Yeah, not working. Okay. So it is stuck here. Now it's going further. Yeah. Oops. So bank will use its exchange fund account and actually buys foreign currency from the foreign exchange market. Okay, so basically Bank of Canada is now buying more foreign currency in the international market. What does this mean? It means how Bank of Canada can buy foreign currency? By giving Canadian dollars. So now Canadian dollar will be in the market. So supply basically is trying to increase the supply of the Canadian dollars. What would happen when supply of Canadian dollar will increase everywhere? So Bank of Canada is actually increasing the money supply. You know from that chapter. Don't get confused with foreign exchange market. But when the supply of Canadian dollar increases, what would happen? Price will also increase because you told you this, that inflation is a monetary phenomenon, right? If money supply increases, inflation will take place. I'm not saying how much, but price will increase. So when price will increase, export will decrease. I told you earlier, when you have inflation in your country, foreigners are not going to buy your product because it's more expensive. So this whole demand curve, this D demand curve will shift back to this original demand curve, that is exports. So exports will decrease and you will come back to here, and that is the same exchange rate. But what is the difference then? The difference is this, which let me erase it. So with this policy, that is buying foreign currency in the foreign exchange market, giving more Canadian dollars or supplying more Canadian dollars in the market, you are still at this point. But there's a problem. There's a difference. Although the exchange rate is same, but with higher price level. So this demand curve is now with inflation as well. So although this is not shown in this diagram, you can't show three variables in two-dimensional diagram. So yes, interest rate is still at ERF, but now we have more inflation in the country. So that is the consequence of keeping your currency undervalued. Then you have to bear slightly higher prices. That is inflation in the country. Now the second problem is if demand decreases for your currency. So if demand decreases, just give me a second. Let me erase this. Okay. So if demand decreases in this direction, so basically, suppose you are not exporting. Whatever be the reason, suppose the US GDP per capita decreases and they are not buying your product, or maybe their taste changes, whatever be the reason. Now Canada is exporting less. That is, foreigners are not demanding our currency. Okay, foreigners are not demanding our currency. Notice here, this is the This is the demand. This is a new demand for your Canadian dollar. Supply is the same here, same supply. So in the foreign exchange market, there's excess supply of Canadian dollars. So the value of Canadian dollars should decrease. That is, Canadian dollars should depreciate if you allow the market to work freely. But because of this restriction, the government or the central bank will keep this exchange rate as fixed. That is, they keep their currency overvalued. Fixed exchange rate, overvalued currency. They don't allow their currency to depreciate. Then what they will have to do? They have an option. The option is they have to increase the demand, right? Now, the government cannot increase the demand for Canadian dollars by exporting more because it depends on other countries as well. You can't say you want to export to United States because if US say we don't want to import from you because we don't have enough money to buy your products, what can you do? So what then government do, that is central bank or Bank of Canada to be more specific, Bank of Canada will actually buy more Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market. So increases the demand for Canadian dollars. How Bank of Canada can buy foreign Canadian dollars from the market? By giving foreign currency. So Bank of Canada has a exchange fund account and Bank of Canada has certain foreign reserves of foreign currency. Bank of Canada does not have unlimited foreign currency. It's not possible. So yes, for the time being, Bank of Canada can use its US dollars, foreign exchange reserves, or other foreign currencies, give this in the foreign exchange market and buy more Canadian dollars. So the demand for Canadian dollar will increase again back to this point. So you are again at the same exchange rate. But the problem here is that now there is a depletion of exchange fund account. So we don't have enough foreign reserves that we have to keep for certain emergencies. Then bank will do, or government will try to restrict, rather than increasing the demand for Canadian dollar, restrict the supply of Canadian dollars. That is, government will discourage imports. Government say, okay, don't import too much, because if you import, it means you are supplying more Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market. That we don't want to, because if you do this, then our currency will depreciate. So these are some of the government policies. Number one. So choices for government action include reduce imports through tariffs or quotas. So you just you restrict imports because you don't want to increase the supply of Canadian dollar in the foreign exchange market. But this is a violation of international trade agreements and retaliation against Canadian exports as well. So if you impose heavy tariffs on imports, then other countries will also impose high tariffs on your exports as well. So there's a problem. Second, introduce foreign exchange controls. That is quota on foreign currencies, because Bank of Canada has already shortage of foreign currency. So Bank of Canada will, or government will, put restrictions. That, for example, if you go to Mexico and you want to buy Mexican currency in Canada, it is difficult for you to buy because there's a restriction, right? This is what we call foreign exchange controls. Negotiate voluntary trade restrictions. So rather than importing tariffs, you can negotiate the other country that please restrict your exports. Create a recession in Canada. And you know what is recession, recessionary gap, remember? The government will try to decrease the aggregate demand by either decreasing its own expenditures or increasing higher taxes. So these are all 4 reasons how government can decrease the supply of Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market, because Bank of Canada cannot continuously keep buying Canadian dollar by using its own foreign exchange reserves. There's a limit. So if it is not possible, for example, to keep that fixed exchange rate at its level, then what sometimes government do will change the fixed exchange rate. And first, let's see if let's see first this diagram. So suppose, and then I'll go back to the slide. So suppose if this is the case, this is the first case, right? Decrease in Canadian dollar. So remember, this should have been the exchange rate, but government is increasing the money supply, the Bank of Canada, and shifting export. No, yeah, hold on. This is the same diagram. Hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I think I have used other diagram. Yeah, so this is the same diagram that I've drawn. So this is not for the inflation case. This is Bank of Canada is actually using its exchange fund account and buying Canadian dollars in the foreign exchange market, right? So this is the same diagram I'm showing you here, if I'm not wrong. So this is the same diagram, right? So the currency, if this market is working freely, that is under flexible exchange rate, then this should have been the exchange rate, right? That is the currency should have been depreciated. But Bank of Canada continuously buying Canadian dollar in the foreign exchange market. Bank of Canada cannot do this for long because Bank of Canada has a fixed, foreign reserves. So what then government will do? Government will say with the same fixed exchange rate system, government will say, okay, now we are refixing this exchange rate, and now we are fixing exchange rate at this point. So government will change the fixed rate from this to this. That is possible. This also you can see if this is the new fixed rate. If this is the new fixed rate, if this is the new fixed rate, right? So you can see the currency depreciates, but we don't call it depreciation because this is the decrease in the value of the currency, not through market, but by the government decree that now this is the exchange rate. This is called devaluation. So devaluation is also a depreciation of currency, but in fixed exchange rate system. In flexible exchange rate system, we call it depreciation. This idea is same, but they have these two concepts are in two different systems. Now let's read this and you will understand. A government that finds it politically impossible to impose any of these policies will be forced to devalue its currency, that is, refix the exchange rate at a lower level. Devaluation of a currency has serious political ramifications. It is often interpreted as a failure of a government to control its own destiny and may lead to a loss of confidence generally in a government's economic policies. So if I ask you what is the difference between depreciation and devaluation, depreciation is a decrease in the value of your currency in a flexible exchange rate system model. Devaluation is also a decrease in the value of your currency in a fixed exchange rate system. That is, this decrease is through government policy. That decrease is through market forces. Now, then we have this last question, test your understanding slide. And then the last slide is just the key concept to remember. You just go your own. So let me just discuss this. Assume that the demand for the Canadian dollar increases. Okay, so shift to the right. Describe the adjustment mechanism to this change. So this is the first case. So if demand shifts to the right in the flexible exchange rate system, the Canadian dollar will appreciate because everyone is demanding Canadian dollar, the value of Canadian dollar will increase. Fixed exchange rate system, a shortage of Canadian dollars on the world market arises because of the higher demand for Canadian exports. The Bank of Canada will need to increase the money supply in order to address this shortage. Doing this will eventually lead to inflation. And when you have inflation, the exports will decrease and you have the same exchange rate that was fixed by the government. So that's all as far as this last chapter is concerned. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.